I knew I was going to be fired before he did. That was the strange part. He was still smiling when I walked into the boardroom, still rehearsing the speech he thought would break me. But I had already seen the email he didn't know I had access to. The one marked transition plan. The one with my name under remove. He thought he was ending my career. I was just getting started. He sat at the head of the table like he'd been born there. Maybe he had. Polished shoes, expensive watch. The kind of confidence you inherit, not earn. "David," he said, folding his hands, "we need to talk about your performance." I nodded. I had built half the systems that kept that company running. 12 years, no complaints, no warnings, no write-ups, just quiet work, stable growth. But his father had stepped down 3 months earlier. And sons who inherit empires often mistake stability for weakness. He slid a folder across the table. Didn't meet my eyes. "After reviewing departmental structure, we've decided to move in a different direction." That phrase always makes me pause. Move in a different direction. It sounds so gentle. It isn't. He kept talking. Restructuring, alignment, fresh leadership energy, words stacked on words. He thought I'd argue, thought I'd beg. I didn't. I just listened. Because the interesting thing about being underestimated is that people speak freely around you. They assume you're slow, or harmless, or too loyal to push back. They forget you're watching. 2 weeks earlier, I noticed something small. A vendor contract pushed through without compliance review. Minor at first glance, but the vendor was new. The contract amount was inflated, and the approval signature was his, not the CFO's. The CEO's son had started signing off on financial decisions outside his authority. I remember sitting at my desk that night after everyone left. The office is quiet, just the hum of the air conditioning and the faint glow of monitors. I think maybe that was the moment I stopped being an employee. I opened the financial logs, cross-referenced invoices, compared timestamps. Patterns revealed themselves to patient people. 3 contracts, all awarded to companies registered within the last 6 months, all tied to a holding group I didn't recognize. I dug deeper. The holding group shared a legal representative. That representative had the same last name as the CEO's son. Different first names, same last name. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. So that's what this is, I thought. Not restructuring, extraction. He wasn't modernizing the company, he was siphoning from it. Slowly, carefully. And I had noticed. That was my real mistake. Back in the boardroom, he finished speaking and waited. "Do you have anything to say?" he asked. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He wasn't evil. That would have made it simpler. He was entitled, impatient, used to shortcuts. The kind of man who believes consequences are for other people. "I understand," I said calmly. He blinked. No fight, no anger, no raised voice, just acceptance. I signed the severance documents, collected my things, shook his hand. His grip was firm, slightly smug. "Wish you the best," he said. I almost smiled. "You too." The walk to the elevator felt longer than usual. People avoided eye contact. News travels fast in offices, faster than truth. I could feel the shift already, the subtle distancing. Survival instinct. I didn't blame them. When the doors closed, I exhaled slowly. They thought I had lost something, but I had gained time, and time is the most dangerous tool a patient man can have. That evening, I went home and did nothing dramatic. No angry calls, no revenge fantasies. I made tea, sat by the window, let the city noise drift upward. Revenge born from emotion is messy. Revenge built on evidence is permanent. The next morning, I reviewed the copies I had quietly archived over the past 2 weeks. Emails, approval trails, Financial statements, vendor registrations. Nothing stolen. Everything legally accessible to me at the time. That part mattered, because this wasn't about rage. It was about exposure. He thought firing me removed the only person who had questioned those contracts. He didn't realize I had already connected the dots. Over the next month, I watched from a distance. Former colleagues still trusted me. A few reached out privately. "Things feel off," one of them said over coffee. "Budgets are tight, but spending's up." Of course it was. He had accelerated the contracts after my departure. Probably thought speed would bury suspicion. It rarely does. Fraud has a rhythm. Too slow, no profit. Too fast, visible cracks. He was moving too fast. I began mapping everything on a whiteboard in my study. Dates, amounts, entities, relationships, a quiet wall of truth. By week 3, I had something solid. The holding company linked to his cousin had received nearly $2 million in consulting fees. No deliverables attached. No measurable output. Just vague summaries and digital signatures. Worse, internal policy required board approval for any contract above $500,000. There was no board approval, which meant one of two things. Either the board was complicit, or they didn't know. I decided to find out. I requested a formal copy of the company's latest public financial disclosures. As a former senior operations director and shareholder, I still had certain rights. That's another thing he forgot. I wasn't just an employee. I owned equity. Small, but enough. That raised an eyebrow. Then I noticed something else. 2 board members had quietly resigned within weeks of his father stepping down, replaced by individuals with limited corporate governance experience, personal acquaintances of the son. I remember staring at their LinkedIn profiles and thinking, this isn't confidence, it's panic disguised as control. He was consolidating power. Illegally. That word sat heavy in my mind. Not unethical. Illegal. There's a difference. Unethical behavior damages trust. Illegal behavior destroys careers. I reached out to one remaining board member, an older woman named Mary Ann. Sharp, reserved, loyal to the company, not to the family. We met for lunch, neutral location. She studied me carefully before speaking. "You look calm for someone who was just forced out," she said. "I am," I replied. That seemed to unsettle her. I laid out the documents slowly. No theatrics, just facts. Contract amounts, familial ties, policy violations. She didn't interrupt. Halfway through, her jaw tightened. By the end, she was silent. "How many people know about this?" she asked quietly. "Just you," I said. "For now." She folded her hands. "If this is accurate." "It is." She nodded once. "You understand what this would mean?" I did. Scandal. Investigation. Possible criminal charges. The company's stock would drop. Employees would panic. It would be messy. I didn't want chaos. I wanted correction. "He fired me to remove oversight," I said. "I'm offering the board a chance to restore it." She watched me for a long moment. "You're not asking for your job back," she said. No. That surprised her more than anything. "I want governance restored, proper audits, independent review." That's it. That wasn't entirely true. But it was true enough. Because revenge doesn't always mean reclaiming what you lost. Sometimes it means ensuring the person who wronged you can never do it again. She agreed to bring the evidence before the board. Quietly. An emergency session was scheduled. The son didn't know yet. He was still signing contracts, still smiling in press releases, still believing he had won. And maybe in his world he had. He removed the quiet man who asked inconvenient questions. He cleared the room of resistance. He just forgot one thing. I had never needed the room. I only needed the truth. And the truth was patient. Emergency board meeting was scheduled for 7:30 a.m. on a Thursday. He hated early meetings. That detail mattered more than you'd think. Men like him prefer control, lighting, timing, audience. A surprise meeting before the market opened would irritate him, throw off his rhythm. I wasn't in the room. That was intentional. Marianne insisted I stay away to avoid the appearance of retaliation. Officially, I was no longer part of the company, just a former executive with equity concerns. Unofficially, I was the reason everyone's calendar had been cleared. At 7:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. David. It was Marianne. Her voice was lower than usual, measured. He's denying everything. I expected that. Stick to the documentation, I said calmly. Not opinions. He says the vendors were strategic partnerships approved verbally by his father before retirement. I almost smiled. Desperation makes people reach backward. Ask for written authorization, I said. Another pause. He can't provide it. Of course he couldn't. Policies exist for moments like this. Corporate governance is slow and boring until it isn't. Until someone tries to bend it. Then it becomes a blade. At 8:15 a.m., she called again. He's getting agitated. I pictured him, jaw tight, fingers tapping the table, that inherited confidence beginning to crack. Has anyone mentioned the holding company link? I asked. Yes. And silence. Then softly, he didn't know we had that. That was the first real fracture, because he believed the contracts were clean enough to avoid scrutiny. He never imagined someone would trace ownership structures, that someone would care enough to spend nights mapping corporate relationships. Underestimation is a quiet gift. By 9 o'clock a.m., the market opened. By 9:07 a.m., internal rumors had begun to circulate. An emergency audit committee vote was called. Independent forensic auditors would be brought in. All new vendor contracts suspended pending review. His signing authority was temporarily revoked. Temporarily. That word is polite. But it rarely means temporary. Around noon, I received a message from a former colleague. What did you do? I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I replied, nothing, just answered a question. That afternoon, his assistant emailed me. Subject line, request for discussion. I waited an hour before responding. We agreed to meet in a private conference room at a neutral office space downtown. Not the company building. He didn't want employees watching him walk into a meeting with the man he had fired. He arrived 5 minutes late. No smile this time. No polished confidence. Just tension. He closed the door behind him. What do you want? He asked. Straight to it. I respected that. I sat calmly, hands folded on the table. I don't want anything. That's not true. It is. His eyes searched my face, looking for anger, smugness. He found none. You went to the board, he said. I presented evidence. You blindsided me. I tilted my head slightly. You fired me without warning. His jaw tightened. That was business. So is this. Silence filled the room. Thick, uncomfortable. You could have come to me, he said finally. I almost laughed. Not out loud, just internally. Come to him. The man who signed off on inflated contracts to a relative shell company. I did, I said evenly. 3 weeks before you terminated me. I questioned the vendor's approvals. He looked away first. That told me everything. He remembered. He had seen the threat, and he had removed it. Only he had acted too late. The forensic audit began the following week. Quietly at first, then less quietly. Emails were requested, financial logs pulled. Internal communications reviewed. The Cousins Holding Company dissolved within days. That move alone spoke volumes. You don't shut down a legitimate business overnight unless you're afraid of what someone might find. Stock prices dipped. The media caught wind of governance concerns. The board issued a carefully worded statement about transparency and accountability. His name wasn't mentioned publicly, not yet. But internally the walls were closing in. One evening, Marianne called again. They found unauthorized transfers beyond the contracts you flagged. I closed my eyes briefly. How much? Another 1.3 million. He had gotten greedy. That's usually how it ends. Not with brilliance, with excess. The board convened again. This time, I was invited to attend as a shareholder observer. He was there when I walked in. He didn't look at me. The forensic auditor presented findings in a calm, clinical tone. No drama, just numbers, violations, breaches of fiduciary duty. The phrase personal benefit was repeated 3 times. That phrase carries weight. When they finished, the chairman cleared his throat. In light of these findings, we are initiating immediate removal proceedings. The room was silent. He finally looked at me then, not with hatred, with disbelief, as if he still couldn't process how the quiet operations director had dismantled him. He stood slowly. "This is a mistake," he said. "You're overreacting." No one responded. Power is loud on the way up, silent on the way down. The vote was unanimous. His employment terminated effective immediately. Further, the board authorized legal counsel to cooperate with regulatory authorities, which meant investigation, possible charges. I didn't celebrate. There was no triumphant music playing in my head, just a steady sense of balance being restored. After the meeting, I stepped into the hallway. He followed. "You ruined me," he said quietly. I turned to face him. "No," I replied, "you did." For a moment he looked younger, smaller, just a man who thought shortcuts were harmless because no one had ever stopped him before. "I was protecting the company," he muttered weakly. "From what?" He had no answer. That's the thing about lies. They require imagination. Truth doesn't. Weeks passed. Regulatory investigations became formal. Civil recovery actions were initiated to reclaim diverted funds. The board asked if I would consider returning in an advisory capacity during the transition period. I declined the executive role, accepted a governance oversight position instead. Less visible, more influence. I wasn't interested in power. I was interested in structure, because systems outlast personalities. The company stabilized slowly. Stock prices recovered. Employee morale steadied. Office legends formed quickly. Some painted me as vindictive. Others called me strategic. Neither mattered. What mattered was this. He had believed firing me would erase resistance. Instead, it exposed his own. Months later, I received a final update from legal counsel. A settlement had been reached. Full restitution of misappropriated funds. Permanent disqualification from serving as an officer or director in the company. The son of the former CEO, barred from ever leading it. I sat alone in my study that evening, the same place where I had first mapped the contracts. The whiteboard was clean now, blank. It felt right. I poured a glass of water and stood by the window. The city looked the same, traffic moving, lights blinking, people rushing home. Most of them would never know what had almost happened inside those glass towers. How close the company had come to being hollowed out from the inside, and how quietly it had been corrected. I thought about that morning in the boardroom when he fired me. The confidence in his voice. The way he believed removal equaled control. He never understood something simple. I was never loyal to him. I was loyal to the company, to the structure, to work. And when he tried to twist it for himself, he mistook my silence for weakness. It wasn't a weakness, it was patience. Revenge, when done properly, doesn't shout. It documents. It waits. It allows a man to climb exactly high enough that the fall teaches everyone watching. He thought he had ended my career with a folder and a rehearsed speech. Instead, he signed his own. He never even saw the moment it became inevitable.